Hey everybody, Jeppy here, and today's video is going to be which defending operators you newer players should be buying first here in Rainbow Six Siege. Now I made a list with 4 tiers in it to show you guys which operators you should be prioritizing first with your renown. At the very top of the list we have must-haves. Now these are operators that the vast majority of the time they're going to be doing you and your team very well. They may even be slightly easy to use, and they honestly fare well for new players. The next section after that is labeled get these operators after the must-haves. These are operators that are also very good, but they might be a little situational and they might be slightly harder to play, but they're really good and you should honestly get a lot of these operators, if not every operator, first as well. After that we have a section called consider these last. Now these are defenders where they're very situational, they might be really hard to play, or the defenders that you might be doing more harm than good if you're newer to the game and don't really know what you're doing yet. Now at the very bottom of the list we have a section called get alpha packs before getting these defenders, because these defenders are so bad and they are almost never worth bringing. So yeah, get ready for that list because that's gonna be pretty funny. Like, you honestly might be better off buying skins before you get any of these operators at the very bottom of the list. Now if this video does really well, I'll do a part 2 to this where I make an attacker video like this. So if you guys want to see an attacker video where I go through and list the operators you should be buying first as attackers, make sure to hit the like button and let me know in the comment section if you guys would like to see that. Now with all that out of the way, let's start off at the very bottom of the list and work our way up. Now the very bottom of the list, the section is get alpha packs before these operators, and the defenders in this section are going to be Oryx, Tachanka, Warden, and Goyo. Now to start off with Oryx, he's terrible, he's awful. His gadget hurts you. His gadget is to break through walls and it hurts you 10 damage. I believe it might be 5 now, 10 or 5 damage every time you go through a wall. Why do that when so many defenders have either impact grenades or shotguns to make rotations as well? I get if you want to punch through a wall and do just full Kool-Aid man through a wall to catch an attacker off guard, but his animation to bring his MP5 back up takes so long that you're just putting yourself at a disadvantage and you're probably going to die. Speaking of the MP5 without an ACOG, who knew? It's terrible. That's right, Doc and Rook have the MP5, but since they have an ACOG on it, it's a really good weapon, but since it has a holo for Oryx, it's just trash, and everything about Oryx is bad. Don't even, just buy an elite skin before you buy Oryx. Next after that is our Lord and Savior Tachanka. Now I feel really bad because Tachanka has a special place in everybody's heart. It's been 5 years now and he's been just trash. So the whole concept of being stationary and on your gadget at the same time, now it works for like Echo and Maestro, but since Tachanka is literally on his gadget and his gadget is used to get kills, it's not very good. Staying stationary is really bad. You're susceptible to vertical play and grenades, and his turret isn't even really all that good. You're actually better off just using your weapon. So Tachanka's bad, sorry. Now next up is going to be Warden. Now Warden's trash. He's honestly so bad. He does have the MPX, and the only reason why the MPX works on Valk to make her balanced is because Valkyrie's gadget is really good, but Warden's gadget is really bad, and it's very situational. You might even play 100 hours of Warden and you might never be able to use his gadget. Honestly, just get a alpha pack before you buy Warden. Now next up is Goyo, and I'll say Goyo is probably the best in this section, but again, he only has 2 of his fire shields. The only thing he got going for him is he can soak up a little bit of utility with those 2 shields, but in the early ranks and if you're a newer player, you're not going to really know where to put those shields, so I suggest skipping him. He also has a Vector. The Vector is a really good weapon, but it's just not enough for me to recommend him to newer players. Now higher up on the list we have consider these operators last. Now these are operators where you may potentially actually want to buy, but they're very low on priority lists and you should not waste your renown on them until you have like all the other operators. Now these operators are going to be Clash, Castle, Cavi, and Frost. Now with some of these operators, they might be good in the higher ranks, but if you're a newer player, you're not going to really know what to do and you might be doing more harm than good. So first let's talk about Clash. Now Clash is actually pretty good in the right hands, but a aggressive Clash player that puts herself in a bad situation and just easily gets knifed and killed is not going to work. You need a coordinated team, people to play around Clash for her to be useful, and her fracking potential isn't really good, and newer players aren't going to like playing her because you're not going to be getting kills. Castle is really used best to break lines of sights and to funnel players into parts of a map. Now if you're a new Castle player, all you're going to do is just barricade windows and random doorways, and you might be doing more harm than good because when your roamers have to make it back on site. Now Cavi's actually a pretty good operator, but you have to be very skilled with her to really make her work. She can either do absolutely nothing in the round or completely win a round with interrogation. The odds of a newer player getting an interrogation are pretty low, and she's really hard to use. She's like S tier for skill, and it just takes a lot of skill to use her, and you might play games and games before you get an interrogation with Cavi. Now I recommend getting her later in your siege career. Last in the consider these operators last section is going to be Frost. Now Frost is very situational as well. You need a highly trafficked window or highly trafficked doorway or something to where your Frost mat might actually go off, and then even then, if the majority of the players, if they know that there's a Frost on the defending side, they're just going to shoot the ground, but when they jump into a window, you might just go games without ever getting a Frost mat kill. Now coming up next in this section is going to be get after the must-haves. Now these are really good operators, and they're going to be Doc, Kapkan, Pulse, Melusi, Cade, Mozzie, Alibi, Vigil, Maestro, Smoke, Echo, Ella, and Womai. So really quickly here, Doc is very good. We all know this. He's the king of spawn peaks, and he never uses stim pistols. But if you are a good Doc player and you do use the stim pistols, there's enough HP to dish around to where you could get your roamers or other teammates back up to a good amount of health, and he could definitely win some rounds too. Kapkan is really good. He's very underrated and slept on. I can't tell you how many times I've got random Kapkan traps, kills, or attackers HP gets like cut in half to where they're really easy to kill later on. His gun's actually pretty good too. It has absolutely no recoil, which is really good for newer players if you're just getting into Siege. Pulse is really good, but he does require a lot of map knowledge, and you're very exposed while you're having your cardiac sensor out. But I can't tell you how many times a C4 from below has saved rounds with the Pulse. Now Melusi is a new operator, and if she's not being banned, she's actually OP right now. The 3 Banshees are really good. She has the T5 SMG, no recoil, high fire rate. So an operator that I honestly considered putting in must-haves, but who knows? I mean, she's 25,000 renown right now, and Ubisoft might nerf her in the future. So I think it's just too early to tell to recommend new players to spend 25,000 renown on Melusi. Coming up next is Cade. Now Cade's really good. He's really good with his gadget, but his guns are really bad. So for newer players, the TSG and his SMG are not very good. You're not going to be getting a lot of kills with it, and only players who can like master those weapons and like are really good with his utility as well should be playing Cade. So out of this section, I suggest getting Cade probably the last out of every other operators in this section, but he's really good as well. It's just his fragging potential is terrible. Now coming up next is Mozzie. Now if I would have done this list say a couple months ago when he had a super shorty, I would have put him as a must-have because he was so versatile, but ever since Ubisoft took away his super shorty, I think he's kind of fallen down off his pedestal. He's still really good. His ability to deny information and hack drones is a really slept on ability, and I think he's just really good. Yeah, consider buying him. Now next is Alibi. Now Alibi should be played not necessarily to like trick the enemies, but to place in front of doorways, in front of windowsills to kind of break lines of sight and to potentially ping the attackers. The Senator, my good buddy, has a couple really good Alibi videos. I'll try to remember to link him in the description, but he has a couple really good Alibi videos where you should, or in Alibi setups too, well, on how you should actually play Alibi. Now next is Vigil. Vigil's a really good roamer, and he has the ability to really make the attackers take forever to push sight. His KIA is really good. His SMG-12 is a really good secondary weapon as well. It's hard to use, but it's really good in the right hands. You don't necessarily need to be a fantastic player to play Vigil, just you activating his ability and the attackers on their drones not knowing where you are and wasting time is enough for him. Coming up next is Maestro. Now Maestro obviously is really good. The Alda is amazing. The 81 rounds, Evil Eyes are amazing. Newer players are more likely to open up the Evil Eyes and shoot and get them shot. Now if you're someone who fights the temptation to zap people with your Evil Eye and that sits there the entire round just pinging people, they're really strong. Now next up is Smoke. Now Smoke is one of the hardest operators to master, but when you do master him and you play him right, he's honestly a force to be reckoned with. The last 30-20 seconds of a round are all Smokes. If his Smoke is still alive and he has all 3 of his beauties, or his toxic babes, he won the round. If you're funneling through a doorway and Smoke has all 3 left, he straight up won. But that's the thing, you have to stay alive, you have to play yourself right, you have to get really good with SMG-11 and the shotgun and using the correct rotation holes and all that. So Smoke, high tier, high skill operator, but when you can master him, he's really good. Now next is Echo. Echo's another really good operator when he's not banned. The ability to have the invisible yokai drones and denying the plant can win rounds as well. You just got to make sure that you're not leaving your yokai drones in vulnerable areas and you're using them when you absolutely have to. And you have to stay alive to actually use them to deny the plant. Now Ella's a really good roamer. Her Grismont mines are really good on doorways or windowsills. Her Scorpion has a little bit of recoil to it, you gotta manage, but once you get that recoil down and once you just throw her Grismont mines around, she could die early on in the rounds, but if you threw your Grismont mines in strategic locations, you can win rounds too when the attackers have to push in the last like 20 seconds of a round. So the last defender in the get after the must-haves section is going to be Womai. Now Womai is actually really good. His frisbees, I think he generates like 7 throughout the round or something, or 5 or 7 or something throughout the round. He's really good, and his weapon is really good too. I don't think he's necessarily a must-have, but he is a really good operator that you should consider buying. Yeah, not much to say about Womai except he's just he's good. He's the only one who can stop Capitao bolts, so yeah, get Womai. Coming up at the very top of the list are going to be must-haves. These are operators that almost all the time are going to do you and your team very well. Now, what better operator to start off this list than Rook? Now, Rook is like the classic operator that almost every new player gets. Every time I introduce a new person to Siege, I immediately tell them to buy Rook, because even if they die in the first 20 seconds of the round to a spawn peek or a rush or whatever, the vestige you put out in the preparation phase helps out your team so much. It guarantees every person on defense to be downed everything besides a headshot and I believe a knife. Bullets to the chest, grenades, doesn't matter, you'd be put down. And then if you have a doc in your team, he could stim you from across the map. Rook is just very good, trust me. The MP5 with the ACOG, fantastic. Coming up next is Bandit. Now Bandit has the amazing god tier weapon of the MP7, and the Bandit trick is very skillful. Like, you need to master that. It's really hard to pull off, but if you could pull off a really good Bandit trick and you have the fragging potential of the MP7, that's a mix of a really good operator, and he has a C4. So yeah, Bandit, an absolute must-have. Now Mira is pretty situational, but when she works, man, she could completely win rounds. Almost there is no other operator in the game that has so much impact on a round than Mira. If you have a mirror window set up on a really good position, there's almost nothing attackers can do about it, and they are practically forced to go around to find another thing or deal with her from above or below, because she is that strong. She is situational, and she takes a lot of skill to use to know where to put your mirrors correctly, but man, she works, she works. Coming up next is Valkyrie. Now Valkyrie is another high skill tier operator. Knowing the best camera locations, how to keep them relatively hidden while getting the most amount of information as possible. You could do like runouts or like C4s from below. There's so much things you could do with Valk, and as long as your teammates aren't pinging on them to get the Valk camps destroyed, odds are most of them are going to survive throughout the rounds. And even if you die early on in the rounds, you could still get on the cameras, and she provides so much utility for the entire team. Now coming up next is Jaeger. Jaeger has got to be like top 3 defenders in all of Siege. So yeah, I mean, not much to say for him. His gun's really great. He has 3 ADSs. And he's just so good, and he's been one of the absolute best the entire life cycle of Siege, and for good reason. He's just amazing. I mean, no other person can really deal with projectiles as well as him. Next up is Lesion. Now Lesion is really good. The T5, we discussed this with Malusi earlier, but no recoil, has very high fire rate, fragging potential is really good. He's really good for solo queuing and for playing with the 5 stack as well. Just goo mines are really good. They're invisible. They don't do 10 damage anymore, but that wasn't necessarily the thing that made him super strong anyways. It was the ability to stop rushers, letting the entire defending team know exactly where the attacker is based on the sound cue, and it forces the attacker to stop sprinting. They have to deal with it and take it out, so it stops them dead in their tracks. And then also come like 5 seconds at the end of the round, if an attacker steps in a goo mine and they have to remove the goo mine, they might not be able to get the plant off as well. So Lesion is a really good operator. Doesn't require a crazy amount of skill, and he's just really good. You should buy him. Now, the very last operator in the must-have section is going to be Mute. Now, Mute does require a decent amount of skill to be pulled off effectively, but he's just so good, and he's slept on a lot. Like, Mute is able to deny information, deny breaches through reinforced walls. I mean, the amount of information you could effectively cut off an entire floor if you were to put mute jammers on the top of staircases or like high traffic areas where drones will be driving through. And he's just really good. You just his fragging potential isn't the best. You got to get good with the shotgun and SMG-11 combination, but once you master the SMG-11 and you get really good at it, he's a force to be reckoned with. Honestly, Mute should be played more than he actually is, and he's an underrated operator. Like, he's really good. Well, that's all I got for you. Let me know what your guys' list would be. Would you have the operators that I have in the must-haves and the other sections? You can let me know and be leaving a comment down below. Are there any operators that you would switch around? I'm sure my list isn't exactly what you were picturing. So yeah, if you would place an operator differently on the list, let me know and give me a reason why, so that we could have a friendly discussion in the chat. Now, if you did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications if you're new. Now, with all that being said, Jeppy out.